Lord of the Rings fans were ready to be disappointed by this show, but it is so shockingly bad it's worse than anyone could have possibly expected. Rings of Power on Amazon Prime Video is the worst thing on streaming right now. And it goes beyond just the departure from Tolkien. It goes beyond the bastardization of lore, all that. If you take all of it away, if you simply take this as not connected to anything Middle-earth or Lord of the Rings, which it barely is, then you still have the worst show on TV. From the dialogue, to the acting, to the editing, to the combat scenes, to the costume design. Everything about this show is bad. And episode 6 is not any different. The Rings of Power episode 6 review, not even a battle can save this mess. Now this is over on Forbes, where a couple people on Forbes surprisingly have been absolutely destroying and ripping into Rings of Power, because that's just how bad it is. And we're going to take a look at some of the highlights, a couple of the cringe highlights that we do have from this week's episode. But there's more bad news on the horizon for Amazon, because yet again, we're seeing that the demand for this show simply is not there. And when you pay $1 billion for 2 seasons of a series, you're expecting it to compete at the top. It's not even close right now. Netflix Cyberpunk Edge Runners debuts at number 3 on most in-demand new shows list. Well, that's not really involving Rings of Power, is it? Except the person that it took off of number 3 is Rings of Power. So now, what do we have here? House of the Dragon, far and away the most talked about, the most in-demand show right now. Followed by She-Hulk, Cyberpunk Edge Runners, and then Lord of the Rings of Power. Just a tick above Andor. And that might change when we start to see what happens the week after. This is fucking horrendous news, but we will get into that in a second. First, I wanted to go over some of the things that people are talking about with this episode. I said it might be the best episode because although it's filled with terrible cringe fight scenes that make no sense and is clearly done with people that have no idea what they're doing choreography-wise, despite all of that, at least there's not as much terrible dialogue. And there will be a couple effect shots that I think are done pretty well a little bit later. But first, everybody's talking about this. Ha 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 ha. What the fuck is this? Well, it's just, it's Galadriel, Warrior Galadriel. She's very impressive, don't you know? Every time anyone comes across her, they have to tell you how impressive she is. So there you have this sequence. Now, we've seen elves do, pretty incredible feats before. You've seen some things in the Peter Jackson trilogy that people always want to reference. But when you see it happen in Rings of Power, it looks pathetically cringe because of the way that it's done. So you do have this orc who shoots an arrow. Galadriel gets off her horse and sits on the side here. And if it were just a thing where she dodged the side, then came back, I don't really think too many people had a problem with it. But the fact that she sits here for another, I don't know, 30 yards as she charges up to this orc, and then swings when she's by the orc and isn't actually anywhere close to this orc. Like, the horse is probably about 12 feet away. She's swinging at absolutely nothing and stays, parallel to the ground for quite some time. Completely would have missed this guy, but nonetheless, he just goes up and essentially explodes. That's what happens to this orc. People are laughing at and mocking this. And then, of course, the shippers are involved. Haladriel, Halbrand, and Galadriel. Of course, I don't know if these people are going to feel the same when it's revealed that Halbrand is Sauron, because he is Sauron. They're going to reveal that at the end of this season. They're going to reveal that he is Sauron. But anyway, they're shipping him. They're putting this music behind them. And look at the dialogue. And this is what the writers are doing. This isn't the shipper's fault. This is what the writers have written. They're writing a romance between Galadriel and Sauron. And shockingly enough, you know what's going to happen? Likely, when Galadriel inevitably rejects him or has to go back to her husband, who's not mentioned at all in this series, well, that's probably going to be what Halbrand needed to hear. That rejection that's going to turn Halbrand angry and turn him back into Sauron. He's going to embrace his dark ways again. So you're going to have some type of incel storyline with Sauron. That's what you're going to have. But look at some of this dialogue. Fighting at your side. I felt, if I could just hold on to that feeling, keep it with me always. And of course, then the shippers do their videos. They're literally doing a romance between Galadriel and Sauron in this show. But of course, the way it ended is what a lot of people were talking about with the origin story for Mount Doom. which, if I could explain it to you in, I don't know, 20 seconds, there's a random fucking sword that's not just a sword, it's actually a key to something that happens to be in this area that's very fucking convenient for everyone. They happen upon this sword. That's what the orcs are looking for. And one guy gets free, he puts it in there, and it releases a bunch of water, goes straight into the volcanic mountain, you know, dumps it on the lava, and then the volcano erupts. That's the origin story for Mount Doom. We just saw it play out. And although I will give credit to it here, I'll give credit to it. I think that this effect for, you know, all this lava rushing down, this magma, this ash cloud, all this stuff, I do think it was pretty good. They even included lightning in there, which is a thing that can happen during volcanic eruptions, which I thought is cool. I'll play it for a second. I did think that that was done well. So I got to give him credit for a couple cool, CGI moments in here. For $1 billion fucking dollars, you'd think we'd have more than what we've actually ended up having. But then you have a scene of all the townspeople seeing this happen, this onrush of ash cloud and lava and magma that's coming towards them. Galadriel not helping anybody to safety, just sitting there and looking at it. You see Muriel freaking out, you see Halbrand freaking out, everybody's freaking out. She just is stoically watching the ash cloud that's coming towards them, that's obliterating all cover of everything. And of course, somehow you know that even though it engulfs everyone, we know what's going to happen. She survives this. Galadriel survives this. Elendil, Isildur, all these people survive this, which is complete and total bullshit. But they wanted a cool scene. So that's what you have for Rings of Power. This will probably be what we see next week with the opening. It's a sad episode. It really is. The fact that you finally get an action-packed episode and it was this bad. This is what we've come to expect from Rings of Power, and that is the reason why we're seeing things like this. Now, this graph is Parrot Analytics, which, if you're not familiar with it, they essentially track all discussions of something, whether it's good or bad, and they try to weigh it, they try to put their algorithm behind it and say, hey, this is how in demand this show is. House of the Dragon continues to go up and up and up in terms of how in demand it is. You can see from a couple weeks before that, what did it look like? House of the Dragon, 49 times what the normal demand for an average series is. She-Hulk was still beating Rings of Power even then a few weeks ago. Well, now you update that, and although it's fallen off a little bit for She-Hulk, it's certainly fallen off a lot for Rings of Power, and a new competitor in Cyberpunk Edgerunners, which I have heard is very good, has now overtaken them. This is not where Amazon thought they would be. This is not who they're supposed to be competing with. They knew that House of the Dragon would be their direct competition. And the most recent ratings that came out, even though people tried to manipulate it, so it's like, hey, it's such a great success for Rings of Power. No, the Nielsen ratings confirmed that House of Dragon is being watched more than Rings of Power. Even on the premiere week, it was being watched more than Rings of Power. So despite that double episode premiere boosting those streaming minutes watched, overall, it is bad news for Rings of Power. And I really don't think we're ever gonna see good news for this show. Now, Amazon's done their best to stop the bleeding, to fix the narrative, to gaslight the fan base, to get the shills out in force, but none of it's worked. People aren't interested in this show, and the people who have been watching it, they can pretty much confirm it's way worse than anyone ever expected. Let me know your thoughts about this and the more recent revelations that another competitor has gone over Rings of Power in terms of how many people are actually interested in this in Cyberpunk Edgerunners. Tell me what you think about all this in the comments below. Smash a like button, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, share this video out there, and I'll talk to you later. Thanks for watching, everyone, and a huge shout out to my patrons. I appreciate you guys so much. Want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram? Check out the description below. You'll find links to my P.O. box and my Patreon as well. And I'll talk to you guys later.